Welcome back to the Kelowna Real Estate Podcast. I'm your mortgage broker host, Taylor Atkinson.
And I'm your real estate agent host, Matt Glenn. What's happening today, Taylor?
Big news this week and last week. Bond market has pretty much tanked.
Falling off a cliff. That means we're rock bottom interest rates, right?
Yeah. That's what everyone's saying. It's really good news.
Yeah.
I think it adds more confidence and a little bit of like maybe media presence that people are, hyping this up. But we were talking a little bit off air before this, just what current rates are. So yes, we have seen like a large decrease from a lot of lenders, but it's primarily on insured mortgages. So that's less than 20% down, less than $1 million. You're paying for that CMHC or Sagen insurance. So most lenders have been dropping that. Like, last week at the beginning of the week, we could get 4.79 on a 5-year fixed. Now that's 4.69. So sounds great. But then when you actually talk about like the nuts and bolts of it, it's not that big of a decrease. That's not to say we're not going to see that continue if the bond market stays low. Yeah. But generally, lenders want to see the bond market stabilize for a few days before they lower rates. Otherwise, we'd be adjusting fixed rates like twice a day. So let's see how this week plays out. But essentially where this came from is some data in the States. Their unemployment rate has been increasing substantially, so much to the point that they're looking at, a recession potentially is the word that's getting thrown around a lot. So essentially when that happens, we're talking about like economic stimulus, and that's generally when we're lowering rates and our bond markets kind of piggyback off their economy. So if that continues, we will see lower rates. But I mean, only a few weeks ago, the bond market took a jump up because, we talked about this before, the Biden and Trump debate. So it's pretty volatile. But anyways, great news overall. Let's just see if we can keep it going for a while.
So I have two different clients who have reached out to me just as totally anecdotal, but they're talking about changing. They're still in variable mortgages, which are like in the sixes right now. Mm-hmm. Kind of like, what are they? Mid sixes for variable, something like that.
Yeah. It depends on the discount on prime. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. So when they called their bank before to lock into a fixed, at that point, the fixed rates were almost the same or more expensive than a variable, right? So they're like, this is ridiculous when their payments started going up, but now they come down. So now there's like a huge, like 1.5, 1.75 point difference between a fixed and a variable. So the reason why I bring this up is because two different clients have told me that they did call their bank to try and switch over into a fixed, but it didn't make any sense. But maybe call again now because things have changed.
I mean, is the bank going to be like, yes, I'm going to save you money by doing this? I don't know. I guess for me, maybe it's, I'm a little bit biased, but as a bank, do they have to be fully transparent?
No, they don't. That's why I'm saying you should call them. Because what's funny is right when the interest rates got the highest at the start, I got a call from Scotiabank and they're like, Matt, we know this is hard on everyone. Do you want to lock in your payment to a fixed rate? I'm like, sure. It went from 6.8 to 7.1, but then I'd lock it in for 4 years or 5 years. I'd have to up my payment and then stick at the highest possible point. That's why you're calling me. So obviously, no, it's not in the bank's best interest to do that. That's why I'm saying people should call them and ask for different options, because there are lots of options. You just have to kind of find them yourself.
Yeah. Maybe reach out to your broker, work with a broker.
Yeah. Reach out to Taylor.
Small plug there. But yeah, certain lenders have more capital to deploy than others at certain times. They'll do cashback promos or slightly cheaper rates, and they'll maybe hedge the market on a certain 4-year fixed instead of the 5-year. Like they have a lot of, equations in the background that tell them how competitive they can be in the market. But when an existing client calls and just says, hey, I want to switch my product internally, they've already kind of made their money. They've locked you in. They know for you to leave, the barrier to exit is going to be legal fees and appraisals and a headache of paperwork, and if you can qualify. So they may not be the most aggressive at that time. But anyways, I guess what we're trying to summarize is it's good in the market, what's happening, but it's also bad for people because.
But what you're suggesting is like refinancing completely and going to another lender, maybe?
Yeah. And you don't have to refinance completely. You can also just switch lenders. You can do an insured switch transfer. If you refi, it voids the CMHC insurance if it was an insured product. Like there's lots of little reasons why there's different specific rates on specific products and clients. But yeah, right now it's not a bad time to do a quick check-in and follow up. And if you are working with a broker or you're an existing client of mine, we track what your current rate was to what current rates are. And if there's an opportunity to save money, we reach out directly and have that conversation.
That's why you're the broker you are, Taylor.
Yeah, you got to kind of have that insurance for clients that it's not just a transaction, but you also then have to incorporate the penalties to break that mortgage. So,
Let's just quickly go over what are the penalties, roughly.
yeah, really tough question to summarize
Yeah, here we
quickly.
go. And I'm coming in hot.
If it's a variable rate mortgage,
Yeah,
it's generally always 3 months of your interest payment. So if your interest payment on your mortgage is $2,000 a month, it would be
yeah,
$6,000 to break that mortgage.
yeah.
If it's a fixed rate, it's usually calculated on an interest rate differential. So, if you're at 6% now and you're going to break your mortgage and they're going to redeploy that money at 3%, they're going to charge you basically the difference of interest that they're going to lose by you losing you as a client, because now that bank has to relend the money at a much lower rate. If rates go up and you break your mortgage, it's generally always 3-month interest again, because banks don't care. They want to get their money back and then redeploy it at that higher interest. So now is the really critical time to do that planning, because when rates are dropping, that's when your penalty is going to increase. And most of the big banks calculate it a bit more aggressively. That is not beneficial to clients. All the monoline lenders are generally much more affordable on their penalty calculation, not using posted rates. So yeah, things to know when you're deciding on a term and a lender. Like if you want a 3-year fix because you might break it, well, you might be better off with a monoline lender that calculates it differently. One other thing we kind of wanted to talk about was, the news about the bond market came out hot and heavy and a lot of hype behind it, which is good, I guess, for our industry. But then when we're considering the difference of a 0.1 or a 0.2% cut this week, it's really not life changing.
I don't know. Some of the hype on social media was not that good for any industry. It was just the sky is falling, like sell, sell, sell. On Sunday night on Twitter, it was pretty dark. And then the next day it rebounded completely up. So,
What we're talking about is the stock market. Like the stock market's crashing. Well, it's
yeah,
down 3%, which is not a lot. And then it's still up 9% year over year. So it's like, it's doing okay. I mean,
yeah.
I think we're going to see a lot of this going into elections, over the next
That was my next
six
point. I
to
think a lot
18
of it was
months.
election fueled, where they just want to get their political points in regardless when
Yeah.
anything happens. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, anyways, our guest today, Michael Sidhu or Mike Sidhu, interesting guy. He works in the life insurance wealth planning type of product, has some insight on where the government is, and we kind of dive into like the debt clock and where things are moving for Canada as a whole. So in terms of why is it crucial to us to keep pumping out money as a government and building that debt. Yeah, so pretty interesting show. Give him a follow on social media. He puts out some interesting content, but I think that's just something that goes along with our intro is like, hey, there is a lot of hype behind some of these things that are interesting, but if you zoom out a little bit, sometimes it's just like a blip in the radar. So yeah,
Yeah.
do your own research.
Listening to the show is doing their own research.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. In this episode, like every episode, is sponsored by Century 21 Assurance Realty, best brokerage in the Okanagan, my opinion. I'm there. I love it. I think you'll love it too. So if you're an agent looking for brokers to switch to, Century 21, happy to have you. And if you're a buyer or seller looking for an agent, call Century 21. A lot of amazing agents there to help you.
Yeah. Right on. Enjoy the show, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I was just saying to you guys, it's a little smoky here in Victoria today. Well, day of recording, we've got a pretty big fire going on fairly close. So
It's funny that it's smoky in Victoria and not in Kelowna today. Like,
it's opposite day.
yeah.
Jasper
Yeah.
is on fire too. Like, yeah, it seems fire season's here. We kind of like to start our show with just connecting you to the listener. What's your perfect Friday look like in terms of work, productivity, what gives you energy, and then kind of leading into the weekend for some fun?
I'm pretty boring in terms of my Friday looks like my Saturday, looks
Yeah.
like my Tuesday, looks like my Thursday. Like every single day I'm up at 6. There's the occasional day that I'll say, yeah, no, I'm turning that sucker off. But every day up at 6. And I get a few things prepared, a glass of water and a few energy vitamins and stuff to start the day. And then I'm usually going for a walk. Got a treadmill here at the house, so I'm usually putting in an hour of walking. My health is very important to me because I'm a diabetic. I didn't choose my parents very well. So I'm a diabetic by default, but I find that for me, a good clean diet and a good clean exercise regimen, and usually walking is fantastic. Walking will take my sugar down, lifting weights will push it up. So I'll usually start with an hour walk and I'll clear some things off my phone. I'm not doing email on my walk, but I am doing podcasting, TED Talks, voice message system that I use, connecting with other entrepreneurs and other advisors across the country from 6 to 7, immediately a protein shake. And then I'll get into some weightlifting. My wife and I work out together, so we're doing that. Then I'm getting showered, getting ready for the day by about 9, start blasting through emails. She's making breakfast or what have you. We already have the day all calendared out. Like I said, we're very disciplined. So we meet once a week. We know exactly what's happening on both of our schedules for the week. And Kate, you're going this way, I'm going that way, or we're working together that day. But I like to say I look pretty good for 83 years old. So, there's that.
It resonates with, I guess, your career, right? As a planner and an advisor.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good jumping off point, because I believe that there's certain areas of life, you're either going to have the pain of discipline or the pain of regret, is a saying that I really love. So that's true in financial matters, spiritual matters, relationship matters, emotional, mental, and physical. So here's another saying that I love: an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Gosh, guys, being in the finance industry for so long, I see a lot of advisors that struggle in the physical area. And because they struggle in the physical area, they struggle in the mental area. Because they struggle in the mental area, their productivity starts to slip. Then we can give more, do more, and impact more the older we get, because we get really effective and we stop caring what other people say and think about what we're doing.
Yep.
Or just like, no, this is the truth as I know it, and I'm just going to stand on this spot and yell it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. We've been talking about that, internally with some other groups. Like, hey, what can you prioritize right now in life that's going to change and give you a starting off point? And it always circles back to like a good diet, good health, good sleep, just starting with the basics, and then the rest of the stuff will follow. But we get too caught up right now and like, you know what, I'm just going to work on this for a little bit more. I just need to get this one last errand or, file submitted or deal done. And it's just a snake eating its tail.
One of the most successful entrepreneurs that I know says, don't focus on that one area. He says a rising tide will raise all ships. So if you think about a harbor, and if you've got all these little boats in the harbor that are different areas of your life, why don't you just change the tide?
Hey, you must have a quality meme social media page. You just have all the I'm just writing all these down. I'm like, this is perfect. This is perfect.
Yeah, these are good quotes. I mean, the rising tide is one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
it. Man.
For your business then, are you all across Canada? You based out of Victoria? What's kind of your client base, and what are you passionate about in terms of like providing to clients, managing portfolio, life insurance, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So I'm coming up very close to my 30th year in the finance industry, because I'm 83, of course.
Yeah,
I
I
started
was
when I
gonna
was
say.
53, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Path kind of went all over, right? I did foreign exchange. I worked the banking floor as a mortgage lender, commercial and residential mortgages, for a while. And then in 2007, I saw kind of the corporate ladder getting squishy up at the top. So I decided to deviate and went into full-time financial planning. I had already had my securities license since 2002. So had been doing a lot of mutual funds, investments, and things of that nature for 5 years. And then I decided to focus on stuff that nobody else was doing. I was really trying to find a niche that nobody else was paying attention to, and that was estate planning, succession planning, and life insurance. It's a very open space, in my opinion, because it's an underserved market. In 2015, I started my own firm. My wife and I just kind of held hands and kind of jumped off the cliff together and decided that that's what we're going to do. I've really focused on business owners, high income professionals, real estate investors, and solving problems, making complex financial issues simplified. If it's simple, it's clear. And if it's clear, it's repeatable. Your client is going to have a good sense of, okay, I understand this and I'm going to move forward with it. But that takes time. It takes time for me to, and my investment is into the client and their financial understanding and understanding of how to reach financial sovereignty more quickly, more efficiently, focusing on tax minimization, control, growing, and compounding what you are working hard for are kind of my passion, so to speak. So that's what I focus on.
Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about life insurance as well, even like whole life insurance. I think there's a lot of benefit there, but it almost feels like people only start thinking about that when they're a little bit too old. I don't want to say too old because you're probably saying it's never too old, but like how much more impactful would it be if people look at this for their children or, even as young adults? Is that part of your role as well to educate them like, hey, this is a really good product, but if we started 40 years ago, it would be a substantial difference.
That's an excellent point, because the power of compounding, which Einstein said was the eighth wonder of the world, the secret of compounding is time. And most people break the cycle of compounding when it's the most effective. If we pay attention to the power of long-term compounding, if you can think longer term, you won't be sideswiped by the matters of urgency that seem to pop up from time to time, no matter what area of life that is. For kids, as an example, if we're using a whole life insurance contract as a way to store and save our capital for our future use, gosh, that's the way I started, is I put policies on my kids before I put policies on myself.
I'm the same as you. I did the same, Mike. I got them for my kids and kind of threw it away on me because you start to see more benefits on your kids. Where we are as a society is like instant gratification. Like I want to see the end result now. To make the sacrifice for the generational wealth is sometimes hard to do.
Yeah.
So what benefits are there for a kid to have whole life insurance?
Well, number one, it's the gift of insurance, right?
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. You've got a life insurance policy for your children. So we're talking about intergenerational wealth. For example, I'm setting up my yet to be conceived great grandchildren or grandchildren or great great grandchildren. I'm thinking legacy. I'm thinking, okay, future. So that's the number one value or benefit, is if one of my kids has, God forbid, an addiction issue in their future or a health issue in their future, and there's a future insurability. The second part is that they can use the capital that I have set aside out of my after-tax income, and that's been growing on a compounding basis. It's safe. I use it because I own the policies, but at some point in the future, I can gift that policy as a tax exempt transfer under the rules of the Income Tax Act. I can transfer that policy to them, and they can assume both the cash value and any debt associated with it at the time. But I'm going to use it, and I'm going to use it to invest. I may have business expenses that I want to pay in my sole proprietorship. My intention is to gift that to the kids with a lot of money in it over time as a future, hey, don't worry about your retirement, I got this. With the prices of food, gas, and housing, how are they going to address retirement?
I think another one that resonates for, Matt and I for real estate is you can leverage some of the policies as collateral to be approved for, lending facilitation. So if your kid's going to buy a place in 20 years from now when they're 20, 25 years old, it's a really good product to have as a net worth requirement. But something I really wanted to talk to you about today was what you just mentioned is inflation, the cost of goods going up, being a millionaire is not being a millionaire. Can we talk about Canada's growing debt, the debt clock? What does it mean? What are the implications? It's a long conversation, but can you try and summarize it for us?
Yeah, we're screwed. I'll just pose a question to both of you. In your life, how would you describe your net worth and debt?
Net worth is like all your assets minus your liabilities. Debt is basically spending tomorrow's funds today.
Yeah. Your debt is your liabilities on your financial statement, on your balance sheet. So if a person had, say, a principal residence and they had 2 or 3 other properties and they maybe had $500,000 in market securities, gross net worth could be $10 million bucks. And let's just say against that $10 million net worth, they had $4 million debt because they had leverage to get into their real estate. So what would their net worth be? 10 minus 4 is
6.
6. So we would say that my net worth is $6 million. So the way that the government does it, what did they say the debt is at right now? About 1.3, $1.4 trillion, right? 1.37 or something is the actual number. But that's not the debt. That's the net worth. The actual debt is $2.01 trillion. And they have assets of $650 to $700 billion, which means their net worth is minus 1.3 trillion. And when you put it in that context, because words are important, euphemisms are really where you find truth. It's not the debt, it's the net worth of the country. And so my big concern is that we're talking about a word that doesn't make sense because we don't understand it. So therefore we have no, oh, well, we've got lots of things in this country and therefore we're going to be okay. Yeah, but it's 2 trillion. It's more than 2 trillion. Our gross debt's about the same as our GDP. Our net worth is about 55% of our GDP. Now, you guys would go to jail if you had that kind of financial statement. I kind of feel like we're like Wile E. Coyote running off, the edge of the cliff when the road goes around the mountain and you're going straight off. That's where I feel that we are, and we're somehow numbing our brain to the reality. I have serious concerns with the sovereign debt in this country.
So that's Canada. Is there any countries that are doing it better? Like, doesn't the US have like something like double the debt to GDP ratio than Canada?
It's not quite that bad, but it's bad.
Yeah.
This is a nonpartisan issue.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm not
Yeah.
throwing anybody under the bus. I'm just saying that this is every political party has an excuse to stimulate the economy. From the books that I read, I would question the validity of that thinking. Do governments need to step in? And I would say no, because every time a government acts, it prevents a entrepreneur from acting in the same, because they're not going to compete against an unlimited well of money.
What are the consequences? Like, what's the downside in terms of like, when is it going to implode? How much debt or negative net worth can we continue to go? I don't know if it's correlated to say hyperinflation and we're like, okay, our fiat currency is gone. We have to completely restart our financial institutes, or does this just go on perpetually? And
Yeah, I think the book The Deficit Myth by Stephanie Kelton, who was the financial advisor for Bernie Sanders' campaign, which said deficits are good and the government can spend. She was a modern monetary theorist. MMT, which basically said we could just have as much as we want, there's not going to be an effect. And there have been situations where stimulus has not had a direct or immediate impact on inflation. But I think that we have seen the issue not being debt, it's who finances the debt. Whether stimulus is inflationary or not. So, for example, if the government sells bonds in the open market and there's a lot of institutional investors, there's a lot of private investors that would throw 10, 30, 50, 150, $200 million to purchase a bond issuance from the government. So if you're taking existing money and buying new debt with that money, and then that money goes to funnel and cycle through the economy, that's stimulating it in a way that the government wants to stimulate. What's the alternative? Well, that 200 million could have been used to purchase other bonds, securities, where those companies would have stimulated the economy in a certain way. I saw a really funny meme, and government starts a toilet paper butt wiping campaign. And then 5 years later, people would say, without the government, who would wipe our ass? It's this mentality that government is inevitable or required. And I would say no. Now, that's non-inflationary debt. What is inflationary debt is when the Bank of Canada creates new reserves and the Bank of Canada then purchases the government bonds. So that's new money. That's new reserves going on to the commercial banks. Commercial banks, as everybody knows, can have an unlimited amount of loans on top of that. And that's what stimulates and inflates the economy. Now, with new reserves is new money. With new money, it devalues each dollar. And so we see that as price inflation. But Ludwig von Mises said, almost 100 years ago now, most people cannot define what inflation is. They see it as price inflation, but that's only the symptom of the problem. The real problem is the creation of new money that goes into an economy. You have to exchange more dollars to purchase the same good. So we see that as price inflation, but it's a supply and demand issue. Economics 101 is supply and demand. The more you have a supply of something and the equal demand of something, then prices will drop. And so when people don't want to hold on to money, they spend it. That's inflationary.
Does it also not matter where the debt is coming from? I believe it was in the 70s. Pierre Trudeau, they decided not to take loans from the Bank of Canada. Prior to that, there was a lot of interest-free loans from the Bank of Canada to build infrastructure, schools, hospitals, highways, etc. And then we've switched from that to taking international money at an interest. Two-part question: why would they ever do that? Since they've done that, we've seen our debt accumulate much faster. We've seen much more difficult times with inflation. Why would we not try and rejig that a little bit to go back to something that was working prior to the 70s?
Yeah, it's monetary policy and it's fiscal policy. So fiscal policy is government spending. Monetary policy is central bank policy. We had a really great system. It worked marginally from 1944 to 1971. And in 1971, when Nixon took the gold standard off, we created a fiat system. Now, that fiat system said that the only thing giving value to money is what the government says it's valued at. And because we put the pictures of the Queen, everybody loves the Queen. So, gosh, that's got to be worth something. It's got to have some value in it. So it's going to be interesting. Are we going to have Charlie Bucks coming, or
We should have Uncle Bucks coming.
the Uncle Bucks? Yeah, I would much rather have John Candy on my money than King Charles. Let's be honest.
Yeah, me too.
So money at interest or money at no interest, it doesn't matter. It's new money, right? It's the creation of more reserves at the bank. If you take existing money and purchase bonds, it's non-inflationary. If you take money at 0 rate of interest or 10% rate of interest, it does not matter. The issue, of course, now, and we just saw this come out in the federal budget, was our debt interest payments, because they had to provide an incentive for people to purchase the debt. And that incentive was, we're going to give you a future exchange value. Because if I had the choice between buying a 5% bond and a 0% bond, the Bank of Canada, if they issue a 0 interest debt, can't dump it in the open market because nobody's taking it, right? So think of the way that the money flows. Money always finds a return. In 1974, the Bank of Canada really started adopting international central banking policy through the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, which was the original Basel agreements. And, you've had iterations. Now we're up to Basel III, which happened in the financial crisis in 2008, which homogenized international banking standards. So that's kind of the cliff notes there's a lot of depth that you could dig into there, but that's the surface level.
Well, I guess very difficult question. What is the solution? Let's not think pessimistically and think, okay, we're so far gone. But if we could make a few changes, or as many changes as you want, where would we start?
We'd shove democracy away and we'd do a monarchy system because kings seem to do a better decision making than democracy. No, I'm just kidding. Although there is some merit to that idea. I think the first step, it's an attitude. It's an attitude with the public to stop depending on government stimulus in order to make your own life work. And that's difficult when government continues to spend. Gosh, I think it's Alexis de Tocqueville that said that once people find that they can vote themselves a share of the public treasury, all democracy is lost. So as long as you keep devaluing and debasing the currency, you're going to have a problem. So the first, I believe, step is, I know that this is part of one particular party's platform, is stop government spending, like overspending. This is the dollar that you have coming in. You have a total of $1 to spend. You cannot spend $1.25 for every dollar of revenue. And the same party's political platform would also suggest that they're lowering taxes. So now you have a decreased government budget. I think getting government out of the way of the people, out of the way of the entrepreneur, out of the way of the builder, out of the way of the developer, out of the way of creative people in the economy that can do good things is the essential first step. And that takes a mind shift in people, because now we've been conditioned to believe that without government, who would do X? I'm a libertarian Austrian economist by nature. I believe in freedom and liberty. And people always say, well, what about this and what about that? Can we stop bombing other people in other countries first? Can we stop spending money on that? Can we get some accountability in government in terms of $55 million or for a particular app that was developed over the last 3 or 4 years? Can we get the $8 billion that's unaccounted for in another department? Can we get that accounted for? Can we recover some of these costs? What about consulting fees to the government? Shouldn't we be actually just hiring at salary somebody that can actually do the job instead of getting all these hundreds of millions and billions of dollars of consulting fees? Let's get some better accountability, but it seems that that's not the appetite of the voter at these times. It's easy to demand that somebody else pay for what you want.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah. Why would you ever do that? Why don't you just increase the revenue, which is increased tax?
Yeah.
That was sarcasm if no one picked up on it.
Yeah.
But going on that note, so I mean, capital gains inclusion, you put out a pretty good post. I was thinking the same thing, when you were posting this. It's essentially a cash call for a political party that is probably most likely on the way out. Can you talk a little bit about the capital gains inclusion in terms of how does that affect us as a country, and why do you think
Sure.
that was, yeah.
Let's start by defining now this capital gains has been parsed out as a separate motion. That's important to understand so they could pass the budget and make capital gains a potential election issue, saying that, oh, one particular party is more for wealthy people. Let's be honest, most people in Vancouver haven't become wealthy because of their acumen. No offense meant by that, but it's just most people have just sat and bought their house in 1960 and now it's worth, a gazillion dollars compared to what they bought it for. And oh, look at all this money I have. So let's talk about what capital gains inclusion rate is. It's a separate now bill. First $250,000 of any investment gain, any capital gain, which is a difference in or appreciation in the price of an asset, is going to be taxed at 50% up to 250. And anything claimed over 250 by an individual will be included for income calculation purposes at 66 and 2/3%. So let's give you a mathematical example. That doesn't mean that for every $250,000 you make, you're going to pay $125,000 tax. That means $125,000 is going to be included in your income and taxed at your marginal rates. So, for example, you had a cottage or a rental property and you made $1 million on it. Well, 750 is going to be included at 66 and 2/3%. Do the math on that. It's like 400,000 something. And 250 is going to be included at 125, which is 50%. And then you'll pay your tax on the net gain. In a business or trust, there is no bottom line reduction in the inclusion rate. So on every dollar of a capital gain, your business, your trust will be taxed at the inclusion rate of 66 and 2/3%. Now, why is that important in a corporation? Because you're going to get taxed at 51% in British Columbia on any aggregate investment income. Let's just say $1 million gain, $666,667 is now going to be taxed at 51% instead of $500,000 being taxed at 51%. So you can see that there's a real focus on attacking small business, attacking investment in this country. And to answer your question about why is this important for Canada, is because investment is going to be punished. So if investment is going to be punished, where are the foreign investors? Canada relies on foreign investment. It's not just our own dollars, but it's other international global money that comes in and says, we have a project in Canada. You're going to be punished when you bring your money to Canada. Money's going to find a return. It's going to go towards the best risk-adjusted return. And when you factor in the tax, you're going to see money drain go to the US or other more tax-friendly jurisdictions than Canada. Now, what's interesting and what I posted about was this isn't legislated yet. So what's the possibility that the Liberals are going to say, we're not going to pursue this motion anymore. We're going to drop it. And it's a margin call. It's a margin call on tax. So they're going to benefit quite well from everybody acting before the June 24th deadline to have their taxes paid in advance on assets that were just sitting there. It kind of goes back to what Freeland said in 2020. How do we activate preloaded stimulus in people's bank accounts? Same principles apply.
Yeah, and I believe it's detrimental to our economy to penalize small businesses like that, but it's almost worse to have leadership manipulating the system in order to get that result. So,
what did Bill Morneau say in his first budget? Business owners are tax cheats, even though those business owners were acting in the letter of the prior legislation, right? So how could they be tax cheats if they were following what they were told the rules were?
mm-hmm.
And it's very difficult to fight against a system that keeps moving the goalposts on the field and are the referees at the same time.
So you were saying that they announced the capital gains tax to get people to move, but then in the fall, when it goes back to session, they're not going to pass the law?
It's possible. It's a possibility. I'm not going to say that I think that's going to happen, but it would be very interesting to see the current party do that. I think it's about a 5% chance that's going to happen, but postulating it a bit further without further slipping down into the polls to say we're going to hammer this through and attack wealth. Oh, it's okay.
But even if they don't go that direction, the argument would be, well, why wouldn't you allow a 12 or a 24-month runway for people to get their affairs in order instead of making it such a short window. That's the big one. But you're spot on. Like the legislation that's being changed so frequently, so quickly, how can you play within the rules if they just constantly change them?
We used to have a system of democratic process. We would make changes slowly over time. Now that just seems to be going at warp speed. If you have a party that knows that they're going out, then the laws that they enact become nonsensical towards the end of their term because they know they're going to lose. Now, 18 months or 12 months until the election must be called. Still a long time, a lot of runway, a lot of things can happen between now and October 2025.
So I'm going to shift gears into our wrap up round. If you could buy one property in the Okanagan in the next 12 months, what would it be?
What's rare? Lakefront. Acreage.
I love it.
If you could give your 20-year-old self any advice, what'd you say, Mike?
Don't be such an idiot.
I feel like I'd tell my yesterday self that.
I woke up this morning and said that.
Yeah.
No, I think the one piece of advice is don't be afraid. Don't give in to the fear of failure or the fear of success. Grow yourself, focus on you, and do whatever it takes to improve your life on a daily basis.
Nice.
And buy a damn insurance policy at age 20 for God's
That's
sake.
what I was waiting for. I'm thinking we're all so bad at sales and marketing. Like we literally just ask you, what property would you buy? Lakefront, acreage. Cool, right on. We should be like, oh, wait, hey, I've got an awesome property you should check out.
Yeah, exactly.
What advice would you give your younger self? Insurance.
Yeah.
I first learned about insurance in 2002 when I took my securities course, and it was 2 pages. And then I took my LLQP in 2007, and I'm like, okay, well, I see a need for term, maybe a need for permanent. It's a total other podcast we'll have to do on that because there's so much depth of information about how to achieve financial sovereignty using the right policy with the right structure. Once you have some of your other financial affairs, like it has to be suitable.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to have a need for insurance.
It kind of goes hand in hand. It's becoming a much stronger tool or asset when we're talking about capital gains included, like stuff like that. It's just everything else is kind of starting to be taken off the board in terms of where the opportunity lies. And it's really pushing into that tax planning, generational wealth planning side, which leads you back to insurance. But like you said, whole nother podcast. Next question. What is your favorite charity or how do you give back?
So I served on the board of the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Victoria. I was very passionate, especially very sad, but we had the only safe house for sexually exploited youth in the province at the time. I decided to leave the board for a few reasons, but one of them is they didn't need me around the table to make decisions. They needed me to go work my butt off to write them checks. So I really see the Boys and Girls Club as being a valuable resource for youth. I'm passionate about youth. I'm passionate about the sanctity of childhood.
Yeah.
So that's close.
I love
All
that
right.
one. Yeah.
All right, Mike, how can Taylor or I or a listener help you?
Look, I think the biggest thing that you can start thinking about is get politically involved. I'm at a point in my journey being on this planet and being a Canadian that whole time for 83 years now. No, just kidding. I'm 51 and I would love to see young people get involved in understanding what policies support your candidate, not what virtue signaling demographically, gender-based voting, all that sort of stuff. I'm voting because she's, my ethnic background. I don't believe in that. I believe in looking at the policy and not the person because people will fail you. Policies and processes will not. So number one, get politically involved, at least to a point where you can educate yourself on what's going on in this country. Number two, take care of yourself. I really love the idea of strong relationships, strong bonds of relationships, especially within a family or something like that. So treat your kids and your significant other as if they were gold, because in reality they are. I would love for people to be involved in their financial literacy and sovereignty. And you can check out a number of sites that we've got going on in order to help people specifically using the proper use of a whole life insurance contract to achieve financial sovereignty at ibcanadagroup.com. Got a lot of YouTube videos going on. We got a lot of stuff. So there's lots of different resources. I really care about holistically the whole person. So if you vote for something stupid, I get to blame you.
That might be my favorite quote of the day for you, but you said a lot of good ones.
You might be stupid.
Yeah. You might be stupid, so I can blame you.
Or not voting at all. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it has been something. I don't know if it's just our age or just the fact that we're getting a little bit closer to the election, but yeah, it's something Matt and I are trying to educate ourselves and our listener more on as well. So yeah, appreciate your time. We'll obviously put a bunch of stuff in the show notes and would love for our listener to connect with you and on YouTube as well. So yeah.
Hey
thanks so
guys,
much.
this has been a blast. Thank you for allowing me to just riff a little bit, talk about what I'm passionate about, and for your hospitality. This has been great.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, have a great day. Hopefully it's not too smoky for you. Keep in touch and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, and God bless, guys.
Thank you.